The first ascent of K2 in 1954 was celebrated as a moment of pure Italian glory, a symbol of a nation rising from the ashes of war. But what if that victory was built on a lie? And what if the heroes everyone celebrated were actually villains in disguise? This isn't just a story about climbing a mountain, it's a story of betrayal in the death zone, a cover-up that was held as fact for half a century, and one man's agonizing fight for the truth. This is how two climbers became national heroes after leaving their teammate and a local porter to die, just so they could claim all the glory for themselves. In the early 1950s, Italy was a country still dealing with the humiliation of World War II and the fall of fascism. It needed a win, a grand gesture on the world stage to bring back a sense of national pride. In the world of mountaineering, there was no bigger prize than K2. Sure, Everest had been conquered by the British in 1953, but for serious climbers, K2 was the real challenge. Standing at 8,611 meters, it's only a little shorter than Everest, but it's far more difficult and dangerous. A steep pyramid of rock and ice nicknamed the Savage Mountain. An Italian claim to K2 almost felt like destiny. After all, Italians had been the first to seriously explore the area decades earlier. The man in charge of delivering this victory was Professor Ardito Desio, a geologist who ran the expedition with an iron fist. His discipline was so military-like that the climbers secretly called him Il Ducetto, or the Little Mussolini. His goal wasn't just to climb a mountain, it was to conquer it for the honor of Italy. The team he put together was a who's who of Italy's best climbers. Among them were Achille Compagnoni, a 40-year-old veteran, and Lino Lacedelli, a skilled 29-year-old guide. They were chosen to be the summit team. And then there was Walter Bonatti. At just 24, Bonatti was the youngest on the expedition, but he was a climbing prodigy, a rising star with immense talent. His job was to support the summit attempt, a role that would throw him into the middle of a terrible controversy. This expedition was a massive operation, involving 16 tons of equipment and hundreds of porters. Right from the start, the Savage Mountain lived up to its name. Storms constantly battered the team, and their progress up the Abruzzi Ridge was dangerously slow. Then tragedy struck when one of the climbers, Mario Puccios, died unexpectedly from what was likely pulmonary edema. The crushing pressure combined with Desio's rigid leadership from base camp created a tense, competitive atmosphere. Despite all the hardships, the team kept pushing, setting up a series of high camps on the mountain. The plan for the final summit push was set. Compagnoni and Lacedelli would establish the last camp, Camp 9, high on the mountain's shoulder. From there, they'd make a push for the top using supplementary oxygen. The critical job of hauling those heavy oxygen tanks up to them fell to the youngest climber, Walter Bonatti, and a local high-altitude porter, Amir Mahdi. Mahdi was a powerful climber known as the Hunza Tiger, and he'd been led to believe he'd get a shot at the summit himself for taking on such a dangerous task. But as the climbers got higher, so did the tensions. Compagnoni, the lead climber, reportedly became paranoid about the younger, stronger Bonatti. He was afraid that Bonatti, who was capable of climbing without oxygen, might try to snatch the summit and steal the glory. This fear would soon lead to a decision that nearly cost two men their lives. On July 30th, Bonatti and Mahdi started their brutal ascent, hauling the 40-pound oxygen sets toward Camp 9th. The plan was for the camp to be set up around 7,900 meters, a spot they could reach before dark. But as they climbed higher and the sun began to set, there was still no sign of the tent. In the dying light, Bonatti looked up at the icy slopes and yelled for his teammates. "Lino, Achille, where are you? Answer!" Silence. What they didn't know was that Compagnoni had made a fateful decision. He ordered Lacedelli to set up Camp 9 not at the agreed-upon location, but much higher and hidden from view, at over 8,100 meters. It was a deliberate move to make sure Bonatti couldn't possibly join their summit attempt. As total darkness fell and a storm blew in, Bonatti and Mahdi faced a terrifying reality. It was too late to go down, and they couldn't find the camp. They were trapped in the death zone, the altitude where the human body can no longer adjust and slowly begins to shut down. Their only chance of survival was to endure an open-air bivouac, something no one had ever done before at such an extreme altitude. With temperatures dropping, Bonatti desperately clawed out a small step in the ice. For hours, the two men huddled together on that tiny ledge, battered by wind and unimaginable cold, fighting off frostbite and confusion. It was a night of pure horror. Mahdi, wearing standard army boots, was suffering terribly. Bonatti later wrote that he had to physically hold down the delirious porter to stop him from throwing himself off the mountain. They had been left for dead. Against all odds, both men survived the night. As the sun came up, Bonatti helped the severely frostbitten Mahdi start the painful journey down. Mahdi would later lose all of his toes to frostbite. High above them, Compagnoni and Lacedelli came out of their tent. They climbed down a bit, grabbed the oxygen cylinders that Bonatti and Mahdi had heroically carried for them, and started their final push. Around 6 p.m. on July 31, 1954, they stood on the summit of K2, the first people ever to do so. They planted the Italian flag, took a few pictures, and became national heroes. When they got back, they told a story. It was a story that painted them as heroes who battled the odds, and Bonatti as a reckless amateur. The official account, written by expedition leader Ardito Desio, claimed that Bonatti had selfishly tried to make his own secret dash for the summit. They said he had used up some of the crucial oxygen during his overnight bivouac, which is why their own supply ran out before they reached the top, almost causing the whole mission to fail. It was a total lie. Bonatti didn't have the mask or equipment to use the oxygen. But in the excitement of a national triumph, this lie became the official story. Italy's glorious moment was secured, and Walter Bonatti was branded a traitor. Back in Italy, the nation was celebrating. The climbers were greeted by cheering crowds and even had an audience with the Pope. Compagnoni and Lacedelli's names went down in history. But for Walter Bonatti, coming home was the start of a nightmare. His heroic act wasn't just ignored, it was twisted into an act of betrayal. He was cast out by the very climbing establishment he had so bravely served. How could one man's words stand up against the official story of a national victory? For decades it couldn't. The Italian Alpine Club, CAI, backed the official version from Desio's book, The Conquest of K2. In 1961, Bonatti published his own book to tell his side of the story, but it barely made a dent in the state-approved narrative. The attacks got worse. A newspaper article flat out accused Bonatti of trying to sabotage the summit attempt and of abandoning Mahdi on the mountain. With his reputation in ruins, Bonatti was forced to sue for defamation. He won the case in 1966, but the official story of the K2 ascent didn't change. For 50 years, he had to live with the accusations. Truth has a funny way of coming out eventually. Decades passed. Bonatti went on to become one of the greatest climbers in history, his skill and integrity beyond question. And the doubts about the official K2 story never quite disappeared. The first big crack in the official story came from one of the heroes himself. In 2004, a guilt-ridden Lino Lacedelli finally published his own book, K2, The Price of Conquest. In it, he confessed everything. He admitted that the camp was deliberately moved on Compagnoni's orders. He admitted that Compagnoni was worried Bonatti would try to steal the summit. And he admitted that Bonatti had been slandered. Lacedelli's confession was a bombshell. It completely shattered the official narrative that had stood for half a century and forced the Italian Alpine Club to finally deal with the controversy it had swept under the rug for so long. After Lacedelli's book came out, the CAI hired a group of independent historians to re-examine all the evidence. The books, the photos, the conflicting stories. Finally, in 2007, more than 53 years after the climb, the Italian Alpine Club published a new revised official report. It was a complete and total vindication for Walter Bonatti. The report officially confirmed that Camp 9 had been deliberately moved. It confirmed that Bonatti had no way of using the oxygen and that the accusations against him were false. Most importantly, it acknowledged that the heroic, life-threatening actions of Walter Bonatti and Amir Mahdi were not a betrayal, but were in fact essential to the success of the entire expedition. The truth was finally out, but it was a bittersweet victory. It had taken over 50 years. Compagnoni passed away in 2009 without ever publicly admitting what he did or apologizing. Bonatti, who died in 2011, accepted the apology but was forever hurt by the decades of lies. As his friend, the legendary climber Reinhold Messner said, for 50 years he had to suffer, and it was too late to say, sorry. Stories of historical injustice and eventual vindication remind us just how important the fight for the truth really is. The 1954 ascent of K2 is still a landmark achievement in mountaineering history. It was a moment of incredible national pride for Italy and a testament to human endurance. But it's also a chilling reminder of how the pursuit of glory, when fueled by personal ambition and national pressure, can lead to the darkest of betrayals. The names of Compagnoni and Lacedelli are the ones in the official record books. But the legacy of that climb is now forever tied to the courage of Amir Mahdi, who lost his feet for a summit he was denied, and the unwavering integrity of Walter Bonatti, the hero who was called a traitor and fought for 50 years, not for glory, but for the simple, complicated truth. If you find these deep dives into the hidden histories of exploration compelling, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more stories just like this one.